How do you see? Well, we've got to get a lot of light in because these are electrical receptors that are dependent on availability of light. We'll look at two different types of molecules that are going to absorb light for you. Rods and cones that you've probably heard of a million times. But what we want to look at is where they're located and how we actually get light into your eye. If you are a simple animal, you can deal with things like eye cups. These are full of rods, but they have small concentrations of them. So we're basically in our planaria here looking for movement, dark light, shadows, okay? We can get compound eyes that have many lens structures associated with them, so many lenses. And really this organism is dependent on its ability to make a composite image. So put everything together and see what you can see. It's okay, it works for these organisms, but for you, we're actually dependent on a single lens eye, or what we refer to as a camera eye. We're going to adjust that lens to focus an image so that you can see more effectively. If we slice open your eye, this is what it looks like. That lens sits here much towards the front of your eye, but what we see from the outside is the iris, or the colored part of your eye, and the pupil. The pupil is what will adjust to change the amount of light that's going into your eye. The sclera around the outside is going to be connective tissue for us. It's going to give our eyeball shape. The choroid is where we find our lens and our pupil and some inner layers to help us protect our eye and give it some shape. The very inside layer is the retina. This is where we find the rods and cones. These are our photoreceptors. So everything else is working to get light to the back of your eye so that you can actually sense it. The sclera, as we said, on the outside is connective tissue. The cornea is covering your iris and your pupil in the front of your eye. So right here, it's a transparent covering so that you can get light into your eye and protect your lens and your pupil in the meantime. The cornea, of course, can have difficulties as we age, and what we look for is the cornea to help us focus light, but as we age, it can actually get some deformities to it. We can actually have something known as an astigmatism, which is your cornea has bumps, or your lens, but in this case we'll talk cornea, and that actually decreases the clarity of your vision because it's not perfect. The choroid, or the middle layer of our eye, has that iris that we talked about, so that's the colored ring. So that's when you say you have a particular eye color, you're actually talking about your iris. We have the lens that sits here, and we've got ciliary muscles. Okay? Those ciliary muscles are going to be critical for focusing the lens of our eye. The iris's job, other than to give you pretty colored eyes, is actually to change the size of the pupil. So the iris is a ring of muscle that contracts and relaxes to change the size of your pupil in the center. So if under bright light conditions, your pupil is very small. Under dim light conditions, your pupil enlarges. The idea is we've got to get light in. So if we're going to have that iris there, we're actually going to use it for more than just adjusting the light coming in. It's actually going to separate out your eye as well, as far as the liquid filling. Your eye is liquid filled. In the front, between the cornea and the lens, is actually something known as aqueous humor. This is very, very watery, clear liquid in the front of your eye. Why is it clear? Well, if you're going to send light through it and try to focus it, it has to be mostly transparent so that light is not obstructed. It's the difference between looking through a glass of water and a glass of milk. Okay? Vitreous humor. This is actually most of your eye, and we refer to it as a jelly filling. It's much thicker, and it doesn't have to be as clear. We often look at it as having some yellowish tint to it because it's full of proteins. Okay? And then inside of your eyelid, we actually see something known as a conjunctiva. And some of you may have had in your lifetime conjunctivitis. What's conjunctivitis? What's the street term for conjunctivitis? Pink eye. So this is literally an infection of the inner lining of your eyelid. Your lacrimal glands are responsible for providing moisture and lubrication to your eyes. So you have lacrimal glands that sit above your eye and essentially rain down tears onto your eye surface. You also have them in the corner of your eye. So this is what produces those little crusties in the corner of your eye when you wake up in the morning. They're dried tears. But they both eventually are going to drain to your nose. So students often ask me, why does your nose run when you cry? This is why. The tears build up and actually drain to your nose, so you're actually snotting tears. Your single lens eye is very, very complex, and we see it in few animals. We see it in you, we see it in squid, and we see it in fish. The difference between you as a mammal and the squid and fish is the squid and fish move the lens back and forth. So this is essentially like sliding a magnifying glass to be able to focus something. Or if you've ever used a microscope, you move the lens up and down until it focuses. This is how their eye works. Yours, we actually adjust the shape of the lens by those ciliary muscles that we were talking about. So we have muscles that attach to the lens and are actually going to change its shape just ever so slightly to help you focus the light. And the idea is to focus the light onto the retina in the back of your eye, because that's where the rods and cones are, remember? That's where our photoreceptors are. We have to get the light focused back at the back of your eye. Your lens is not solid. It has some pliability to it. It reminds me of kind of the consistency of a Skittle. So you could squish it, but it's kind of hard and has resistance to it, right? Skittle, the fruit-flavored candy. So your lens is going to adjust to help focus light waves at the back of your eye to the best of your ability. Now, we do see differences in, of course, vision in different individuals. The idea of accommodation is your ability to change your lens shape so that you can focus those images onto the retina and get it to the rods and cones. Now, if you're not able to focus that lens as well as you should or as clearly as you should, we end up with what we call accommodations or vision issues in your eye. And so when we look at your ability to see things up close, okay, so if you're what we call farsighted, you have distance vision. If you're nearsighted, you have what we call near vision. And so the problem is you can see things up close and focus on things fairly well up close because you can get that focal point pretty close to where it's supposed to be. But you may not be able to see things far away. And we even see this much more extreme many times where this light will actually focus behind, it would actually come to a focal point behind your eye. Well, that's not useful, because if it's not at a focal point here, it's going to be blurry for you. And we'll give you glasses or contacts to help adjust your vision so that we can get a perfect focal point on those rods and cones at the back of your eye. Those rods and cones are called such because that's actually what they look like. Rods are responsible for black and white vision and dim light. They can focus in very low light conditions. Cones are color and need very, very high intensity light. So this is why at night when you're walking around, see if you can distinguish colors like light yellows and greens and so on. You can't tell color as well at night. And the reason is you need high intensity light, and it's just not available at night. So black and white for our rods, dim light, and this is your night vision. The idea is all of these photoreceptors are at the retina at the back of your eye. They're collecting information, sending it out through your optic nerve to your brain for processing and interpretation. If you have perfect focus, we find the perfect focus, or the best place for focus, is where you have lots and lots of cones and the best color vision you can have. And it's in a spot called the fovea on your retina. High concentration of cones, best vision you can have. Where we don't want your light to focus is in this spot right here associated with the optic nerve. There are no rods and cones in that space. So if your lens is actually focusing all of the light to that space where your optic nerve leaves the back of your eye, you'll never see a single thing. This is what we refer to as the blind spot. There are, of course, many vision disorders. We talked about astigmatism and presbyopia and hyperopia. Look at near and farsightedness. I was showing you how we focus on our retina and your ability to focus on that. Presbyopia is in particular farsightedness, and this is typical with aging. It means that your lens or your cornea are not focusing things quite as well as they used to. And these are folks that usually just pick up reading glasses to see things that are close up. So if you are farsighted, it means that you have trouble seeing things close up. So reading glasses would work just fine here. If you're nearsighted, it means that you have trouble seeing things far away. Colorblindness in about 8% of our males, and it does occur in females. It's carried on the X chromosome. But you typically need, in females, 2 bad copies of that, of the colorblind gene to actually inherit colorblindness, but it does occur. And red and green is the most common, but there are many others, including yellow-green and yellow-blue. There are other types of colorblindness. Some individuals are completely colorblind, meaning that they likely have no cones at all in their retina. Cataracts affects your lens over the course of your lifetime. We do have all kinds of surgeries now that help adjust and deal with cataracts in individuals, but it deals with your ability to get that light clearly through your eye. And remember, we said this is the difference between looking through a glass of water or a glass of milk. Astigmatisms, as we mentioned, changes in your lens shape or your cornea shape over the course of time. They almost appear lumpy. I know it's very, very hard to see in this image here, the difference between the normal cornea and this one is actually kind of lumpy around the outside. And they can actually now make glasses and contacts that will help individuals with this by grinding the lenses to counter that focal issue associated with the lens or the cornea.